This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Welcome back. My guest once again is Barbara Bartolome. Barbara, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you. I am happy to be here with you.
I am loving your stories. They're so amazing. So for those of you that haven't listened to part 1 and 2, please do that first. And now we're going to dig in just a little bit deeper. We ended and we were talking about your husband that you met. And the two of you had an interesting experience when you were driving and you heard a voice tell you to slow down.
Yeah. We were north of Santa Barbara coming back from San Francisco, and I had done 4 talks up at IANDS groups up in San Francisco. So we'd been up there 5 days, and my husband was driving our van, and we were about 30 miles north of Santa Barbara. It was about 9:30 at night. And we came around this corner, and it goes into from the interior. The roadway comes from inland, and it hits the ocean, and it curves to the left, and it goes down along the ocean towards Santa Barbara. It's called the Gaviota Coastline. So we went around that corner, and it's really historically a very windy location. So the wind gusts were happening, and, it's no big deal. And we're feeling the wind against the van, and I'm sitting in the passenger side, and I had my seat laid backwards, and I was looking out the window at the moon and the stars, and, just happy to be almost home. And this big gust of wind, probably 60 miles an hour or stronger, hit the side of our van, and I watched, laying back in the seat, I watched my husband's hands on the steering wheel just struggling to hold the steering wheel secure and not let the car go out of control. And so after it kind of died down again and it was just gusting again, I said, Victor, I think with that type of, situation that just happened with that big gust, we shouldn't be doing 65 miles an hour. I think we should slow down and do 30. I said 50 miles an hour. And so he said, yeah, I think you're right. I think we should do 50. So we went along at 50 miles an hour, and I thought everything was okay. It was probably 5 or 10 minutes later when all of a sudden I heard this voice in my ear on the ocean side, and it went, danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And I was like, okay, that was weird. And so I sat my seat up, made sure my seatbelt was tight across me. And then I looked over at Victor and I said, you know how I sometimes hear from the other side? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I just heard danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. So something dangerous is up ahead. I don't know if it's a tree that's been blown over or if it's a car that's gone out of control, but we're going to need stopping time to be able to avoid it. So let's do 30 miles an hour instead of 50. And he looked over at me and he said, Barbara, we're on the freeway. We can't do 30. And I said, wait a second. And I turned and looked through the back of our van. And I said, there's not anyone back there, Victor. There's no car lights. No one around us is going to care whether we're doing 30 or not. So why don't you do 30 to be safe, so we'll have stopping time. And then if you see a car coming and you feel like it's, important for you to speed back up to 50 for a moment, do that until they pass you, but then slow back down to 30 because we're going to need that stopping time. And he goes, okay, I can do that. So for another 10 minutes, we're doing 30 miles an hour. Weirdly, no cars caught up to us. That's the main roadway from the north into Santa Barbara. What we didn't know was that the California Highway Patrol had closed the freeway behind us because of what was ahead of us. So we're going along 30 miles an hour, and I'm intently, trying to see, is there going to be a tree blown down? What are we going to see up there? And we come around this big bend in the road, and way up in the dark in the distance, because there's no street lights up there at all, it's just totally dark, is a single police car with its lights going. So I immediately knew right here, it hit me right here, that's where the danger is. So I was intently looking through, trying to see, as we got closer and closer, what is the situation? What's the danger? So first thing I realized is that, wait a minute, the police car isn't parked off the freeway. It's parked blocking the slow lane. So we're going to have to go into the fast lane to go around it because it's stopped and blocking the slow lane. The other thing is there's no police officer anywhere within the range of the lights or inside the car. Where's the police officer? So as we're coming up in the slow lane behind the cop car, all of a sudden, Victor starts to change lanes to go over into the fast lane. And when he did that, I don't know who it was from the other side, but they literally grabbed my upper arms. I felt two clenching hands on my upper arms, and I saw then this vision of a face that was right in front of me, and it was shimmery, and I heard 10 miles an hour. And the whole thing freaked me out because touching me, face in front of me, I completely freaked, and I went 10 miles an hour, and I echoed it. And Victor had changed into the fast lane, so he slowed down. So by the time we got level with the police car, we were doing 10 miles an hour. So the policeman wasn't in the car. Still couldn't see the policeman. We're rolling past the police car, and finally, about 30, 40 feet in front of the police car, our lights finally lit up. The semi-truck that was laying across the freeway, the cab of the truck was on its side, so the dirty bottom of the truck was towards us, no reflectors or anything. And the cab of the truck was completely blocking the fast lane, and the rest of the truck was blocking the slow lane and off the highway. So we were heading right for the bottom of the cab of the truck, which is where the gas tanks are. So because we were doing 10 miles an hour, Victor was able to go off into the left-hand side where the gravel was and go around the front of the truck. And on the far side, I looked out my window, and there was the police officer standing up on top of the truck. His legs were spread, and because the wind was blowing and everything, he hadn't heard us coming, but he was shocked because he saw the Toyota van down below there, and he had been leaning over and talking to the truck driver who was trapped inside. He knew they'd stopped closed the freeway clear back there, but he didn't know there was a car in between that closure and here. So if we hadn't had all those warnings, we probably would have just, wondered why the cop car was there, gone into the fast lane and plowed right into the cab of the truck and killed them and us with an explosion. So as we were going, after we passed it, we were going down towards Santa Barbara, no cars or anything, obviously. And I was saying thank you to the other side. I was saying, thank you, God, for, taking care of that situation and warning me ahead of time. I'll always listen to you. I know that you're always helping, and this is what intuition is. When you get an intuition moment, that's not you. That's them trying to plant something so that you'll be able to figure something out that you don't have the capacity to do. So I was thanking. And then Victor, like 10 minutes into the thanking, says, Barbara, how did you do that? And I said, Victor, I didn't do it. All I did was listen, and they warned and they controlled the situation so that we didn't have that big, situation with hitting the truck. And I said, if we would everyone would listen, then they'd have that help too. And so Victor said, well, if I had not just lived through that whole experience and you told me that happened, he said, I couldn't have believed it. He said, I had to see that to believe it. That was absolutely incredible. And the bottom line for things like that is listen to the other side. When they're warning you and they say, don't go down that alleyway or, slow down before that intersection. I've heard a lot of people who have told me stories because of this story, have told me stories where they, got a message to slow down before an intersection, and they avoided a crash because of a situation that they wouldn't have been able to slow down for by the time they got there if they hadn't listened to the warning that they got. So listen to the warnings. They're from the other side. They love you. They want to take care of you. They want to help you. Listen to the warnings.
In fact, your husband said to you at one point, he said, Barbara, I think these things happen to you because you are brave enough to talk about them. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's, because I am brave, I boy, I am brave. And a couple of things that happened with the brave part of it have been really hard for my family to adapt to. Um, One of the brave moments was when I had my daughter who was in third grade and my husband's daughter who was in junior high, and I picked them up from a movie theater. And we were coming up State Street, and I saw this guy running alongside the side of my car right down the middle of the street. And then I saw four more guys doing the same thing. And I thought, well, maybe they're just challenging each other to do something dumb. And I got to the stoplight of the main intersection, and I was stopped there, and I saw the guys run through the intersection dodging cars that were going the opposite way. And they got to the far side right in front of the Saks Fifth Avenue store in Santa Barbara, and the four guys caught up to the first guy and they knocked him to the ground. And as I was sitting there at the stoplight right across the street from them, I saw them punching, all four of them punching the one guy. Well, having had my mom be a cop, I rolled down my window and yelled, "Stop that right now," in the meanest voice I could muster. They stopped and they looked at me, and I had pulled forward because the light had changed, so I was right across the one lane of traffic, from where they were. And they stopped and looked at me. When they saw that I was a woman and, not fearful of me, they went back to punching him. So I put my car in park, and I blocked the traffic behind me, and I told the girls to stay in the car, and I got out of the car. And then as I started to walk across the one lane to get to these five individuals, the man behind me yelled, "Hey, lady, what do you think you're doing?" Because I was blocking traffic. I'd stopped my car. And I said, "I'm going over to intervene in that situation. You could assist me." And the guy goes, "Oh, no, I'm not getting involved." Well, that really pissed me off because, I'm a girl and he could have helped. So I stormed over to the four guys that were punching the one guy he was laying on his back. And I took the sweatshirts of two of the guys and I grabbed them, and then I put my head down right between their two heads, and I looked at the other two guys, and with all the fury that I could muster, I said, "Stop it right now." And the two guys that were across that saw all that fury were scared of me. I was like 55 years old, I'm an old lady at that point. And they got up and ran. So the two guys I was hanging on to, because their two guys got up and ran, they got up and ran, and they left me with the guy on his back. So I helped him stand up, and I said to him, "Are you okay? Are you going to be okay? Are you okay?" And he was already in shock, and he looked down at his shirt, and he had these red dots, and I thought they were part of his shirt design. They had been, one of the four had been stabbing him with a sharpened screwdriver, and I didn't know it at the time, they'd punctured one of his lungs. They were trying to pierce his heart. And it was a gang induction from a city that's down towards Los Angeles. And these four guys had come up to Santa Barbara to kill somebody, and they just targeted this 19-year-old boy. He didn't know them. They didn't have any connection with them, nothing. And so I took him in and put him in my front seat of my car, drove him to the hospital. He was already so far gone by the time I got him there that he couldn't say his name or his age. I'd asked him that initially. And so when he got to the hospital, I told the hospital what I'd gotten from him. And then the police arrived, and I had to spend 3 hours with my two daughters at the hospital talking to the police. Well, then they asked me to go down and identify the gang guys that they had caught. And so we went down, and they wanted each one, my daughter and my other daughter, to each go in a police car separate, each one of us separate. And it turned out that my youngest daughter was able to identify which of the four guys had the sharpened screwdriver in his hand, because she had actually seen the instrument punching into the guy. So she actually had watched that from the car one lane away. So we became the key witnesses to an attempted murder, and with gang enhancements, we had to go to court, and we were sitting outside the courtroom, and all of the gang members' families were on this bench across from us, and we had like 6 police officers surrounding us, And what ended up happening was that I was sitting there saying, God, please get us out of here. Please don't let us have any kind of repercussions for this situation. I know I did what you'd want me to do, which was save that 19-year-old boy's life, but please, I don't want to go in the courtroom. I don't want my daughter to testify. Please get us out of here. And after 2 hours of sitting there and praying the whole time, the district attorney came out, and he was shaking his head and walking towards us. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And he came over and he said, well, you're free to go. And I said, what? Why? And he said, well, the guy that your daughter was going to identify as having done the actual stabbing pled guilty. He said, I've never in my life heard of this happening before, never seen it, of course. He said that means that all 4 of them will go to prison because they're all now guilty because he pled guilty. And so he said, there's no reason for you to go in. So we walked away, never had any repercussions for the whole thing. But my kids were always like, Mom, cut it out. We know you're brave. Don't, but I've had to talk to them. They're all grown up now. Their youngest is 28. And I've had to say, if I'm placed in a situation where I can contribute and save somebody's life like I did in that situation, I will always do it. And if it means that that's my exit out of here and I die because of it, it is meant to be. And that's my exit and I get to go home. Don't worry about me. So it's really hard for the kids, of course, to accept that, but they have over the years, and they realize, I'm just going to do it anytime I'm approached with anything that I need to intervene with, I will do it. So, and plus I have a 7-foot backup, but he's really gentle and kind. So I'm not sure that he would actually, he just looks kind of like 7 foot, but yeah, he's my gentle giant. Yeah.
I want to go back to, you get a lot of guidance, you get knowing, you hear voices. How can the rest of us tune more into that guidance?
Yeah, I think by opening the door, by telling the other side in your prayers or whatever you want when you're talking during the day, that you understand that they're there and that you understand that they want to help and that you welcome their interaction in your life. I think by doing that, it opens up the communication where they are able to communicate with you, and it is totally beneficial to have that interaction. And I've seen it in so many times in my life. One of the big ones was when I was pregnant with our youngest son, and I was about 6 months along, and I was told that I just got this big informational blurb that just hit me right here, that I was going to have an 11-pound baby. And my other kids were 7.5 and 8.5 pounds at birth. This was going to be a massive monster that was going to come out of me, and because of the 7-foot tall husband. And it needed to be evaluated whether I needed to do a C-section instead of vaginal birth. And I went to the doctor and told him, I didn't want to tell him I was a near-death experiencer. I didn't want to tell him anything. I just said, I'm really a big girl, and my husband's a big guy, and, my other kids have been, 7.5 and 8.5 pounds, but I've got this really strong feeling I'm going to have this really big baby. So can we talk about that? And he was just completely dismissive. No way. Or, no. So after about 3 visits and asking him to talk about it, my husband said, you're just going to have to tell him you're a near-death experiencer and you have this information, So I did. I disclosed that to him and said, I'm a near-death experiencer. I get this input. And I said, I know I'm having an 11-pound baby. I need you to listen to me. We need to analyze whether it's going to be a problem at the delivery. He completely dismissed it and said, if you want to keep talking about this, it was a week before the baby was due. He said, why don't you find yourself another doctor? I'm not going to talk about it anymore. So I was working full time, had 4 kids, and, monstrously big, and I didn't have the ability to go and find another doctor. So I basically just said to the other side, to God, please help me through this whole thing because I'm going to need you. So I got to the hospital a day of the birth, and yes, indeed, it was an 11-pound baby. And he delivered the head, and then he realized that the rest of the baby wasn't going to fit. And he started panicking, and he called for another doctor, yelled down the hallway, is there another doctor in the near vicinity? I need assistance, stat. And nobody came. And I was sitting there praying in the moment. Here I am trying to deliver a baby, and I'm saying, please, please help, help, help. And so the baby was delivered, and yes, indeed, he was 11 pounds. And that doctor called his cronies and told them to come over to the hospital and see the 11-pound baby he had delivered. And so all the people that were coming to visit me would go to the nursery window, and they would say, your doctor is out there like talking about your 11-pound baby with other doctors and stuff and showing it off. And I was like, gosh, really? So when I had to go back to see him 2 weeks later, I walked in and I didn't get dressed down like the nurse asked me to. And so she kind of, left the room. I said, I'm not going to dress down. And he walked in. He said, why aren't you dressed down? And I said, well, because Dr. So-and-so, you didn't listen to me when I told you the aspects of me having this 11-pound baby. You didn't believe me. And I said, I think now that I've proved to you that I knew what I was talking about. And I think that you should learn to listen to other people and believe that there's capacities that are beyond you. And therefore, I actually can't have you as a doctor any longer, and I'll find a doctor who will listen to me. So I got my medical records and left him. And 1 year later, he stopped being a doctor in Santa Barbara. And he ended up on our city council, and he had so many conflicts with other people because of his ego and his non-listening skills that he ended up having real problems. He's now deceased, but he had a real rough time on the city council. And it's just he didn't listen to anything that I said, and he couldn't accept it, and it was too bad. But those comments that I get from the other side have helped me all the way along my life. There have been so many incredible moments that I've had that I can contribute to the other side helping that is just gorgeous. And I love the fact that they're here and that they contribute. I hope everybody can open up that door and ask them to come and be in your life and help you. It doesn't mean you have to be on your knees with your hands together. It just means you're talking to them and you're having them be someone who's close to you in your life, and they help. They will help.
And while you've had some negative experiences with doctors, you had a bit of a full circle moment because years later, you began speaking about your experiences and you had a group of doctors that came and listened to you.
Yeah, I was asked at the hospital here in Santa Barbara to do a grand rounds talk, and the person who invited me to do that is supportive of the IANDS group that I run here in Santa Barbara. And on my board of directors for my IANDS group is an actual doctor here in Santa Barbara. And it's not the same one who invited me to do the Grand Rounds talk. And the Grand Rounds talk is held at the hospital, and it's on the doctor's lunch hour. So all of those that are free to come can come. And we had like 60 doctors show up and 40 nurses. And the person who arranged it said it was the largest group that he'd ever seen come to listen to anything that was presented to them. And I had another doctor who was helping me with the Grand Rounds talk that wrote a book called The Science of Near-Death Experiences. His name is John Hagen, and he's from, I think, Missouri. And I've got his book somewhere up in my bookshelves up here, but he also was there with me, and I gave my NDE talk, and then he talked about the science backing near-death experiences. So these doctors could be open when they experience someone who has a near-death experience in front of them, that they won't close down the experiencer and say, anything negative. Instead, they'll say, that's called a near-death experience. There's lots of information online after you get a chance to take a look at it. You might check to see if there's an organization that you want to ask questions to, something that's open so that the person can follow through and follow up on their experience and not just, put it inside them and hold it, inside them for 12 years like I did. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't know who to talk to. So there was no internet back then. So it's really important for all of the NDErs to give their stories to people, because I think they're gifts that help people. I've heard so many times from so many people that not only did it delete their grief from losing whatever loved one that they had, it completely diminished their grief to the point where they felt like their loved one was in a wonderful place and they could feel happy about that and still talk to their loved one, but not worry about where their loved one was. And also the fear of death that people have. It's just diminished completely the fear of death when people hear these near-death experiences. And the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies actually did a research project, and they found that people who listen to near-death experiences or read the books about them and find out about all of these aspects of all these people across the world that have had near-death experiences, that they actually gain the benefits that the near-death experiencer gained in not fearing death and having a relief from grief and feeling purpose in the world and wanting to do good and all the different things that the near-death experiencers gain from their experience. People who haven't even had them that listen to these experiences, they gain the same in it may be a lesser level, but they gain the same things.
And I do think it's important to share these stories. And one of the reasons I have this podcast, in addition to sharing these stories, is I think they teach us to be kinder and more loving. And certainly you are so kind and loving. How important is that?
Oh, so important. Oh my gosh. Because in all these near-death experiencers, they talk about, and in mine, I had the flashes of the experiences that I'd had in my own life. But near-death experiencers talk often about the life review that they see at the end of their life when they're going through this process of the death situation, and then they're brought back. But they see, the way that they contributed to other people, the good things that they did as well as the bad things, and they feel value over the good things that they contributed to people and organizations that they might have helped. But they also feel the love and the kindness and everything that the people that they contributed to felt when they contributed whatever it was. So they feel the actual feelings that the person feels when you've done something to them. So if you're out there doing bad stuff and being mean and saying rude things and stuff like that, you're actually going to see and feel what you caused in that person in that life review. So why would you want to do that? You want to choose to try. None of us are perfect, but you'd want to choose to try to be good and contribute positive things and go out there and love people. And like I said, adopt by love and have all these people that you've done something that they will long remember. And in the life review, you'll see how they remembered that and how they took it and how that, touched them inside. So that's what a lot of the experiencers then turn to, finding ways to be kind to others and helping in the world and loving people that they don't even know. I mean, I love strangers. I literally, all over Europe when we were on our trip, my husband, laughs with me and says, "Barbara, you just talk to everybody." And, it's interesting how many people will ask me, "Well, what do you do? Where do you work?" And I would say, "Well, I'm retired, but I run a near-death experience group in Santa Barbara." And of course, that launches me to be able to talk about near-death experiences or talk about if they ask me about my experience. And so it's educational for them, for me to talk to them. And I always feel that all the NDErs feel that this is a gift that they're able to give to others to help them learn and grow and be a better person here in the world, to have that near-death experience be something that helps guide them.
You've talked a lot about IANDS, so tell me more about your involvement with them.
Yeah, so I started the group in 2011. August of 2011 was my first meeting. There was a big article in the Santa Barbara News Press newspaper about my near-death experience that started the whole ball rolling. And in that article, there was a little square that I had called the guy who had interviewed me about a week after he interviewed me. And I said, "I'd like you to add in there that I'm going to start a group in Santa Barbara." So he put the information of where I was going to meet. In our first meeting, we had like 35 people show up, which is pretty good. Currently, we have probably 80 that show up at each month's meeting. But before COVID, it was more like 150. And we have a guest speaker, and we are meeting at a library gallery that's in downtown Santa Barbara called the Faulkner Gallery. Excuse me. And we do it once a month on the second Wednesday. So we have about an hour and a half that the speaker talks, and then a half hour of questions and answers from the audience. And we have the nicest people who attend the meetings. It's always the kindest, good group of people. There's never anybody who's like mean and questions it and is nasty and anything like that, which I've heard other IANDS groups have had. There's some people that can't accept this information and won't accept it, and I wish them well. I feel that it's a gift that I'm helping others to grasp, and I think it's a beautiful thing for people to understand better about death. I don't think that we're ever taught what the truth is about death, about just transferring over and being in a different energy a level than our bodies. When I looked down at my body, I literally didn't care anything about it. I was perfectly fine up on the ceiling, and I know that I would have been fine to wherever I ended up in that situation if I'd stayed on the other side. So it's not something that we have to worry about. And I think that it's just too bad that everyone in the world doesn't capture this, and I wish they would. So I think it's really helpful, and that's why I continue to talk about it.
For all of you that are listening, there are IANDS groups around the country, so I'll post a link to IANDS in the description. And Barbara, I just want to end here and ask you if you have any parting words of wisdom that you can share with us before we wrap this up.
Well, one of the things about the IANDS group that I want you to let them know is that there are online IANDS groups, that they don't have to have a physical group that's nearby their community that they live in. They can actually access the same type of interaction with an online group, and that's called ISGO, ISGO. So I think the website is isgo.iands.org, and they can find when they have these meetups online, and they have speakers online and everything. So that's a really good resource for everybody. My whole my whole life has been all of these wonderful moments that have given me insight into that there is something beyond this life. There are, I don't care if you call them angels or God or, whatever you want to call them, there's somebody out there that wants to help us and to have us, go through our life and have benefits and assist us. And I think there's been so many people who have talked about the assistance that they've gotten from the other side, and not just me. So I think if people open the door to that assistance, and they, just make it, they just understand that it's there for them, and that they can listen and learn from the assistance that's given to them, and how beneficial it is. I think that that's really important, that people grasp that. It's not just NDErs that get this assistance. It's everybody. So I hope that, life purpose, kindness, love, giving yourself in ways that you're going to look back on and say, "Whoa, I did a good job." When you see your life review, I think that's all that we need to keep focusing on. It's not about money. It's not about, all the other aspects out there in the world. It's not about ego. It's about doing your best in life with others, helping, being kind. All of it's really easy to do if you decide to do it.
Thank you, Barbara. You have helped so many people. You've touched so many lives in your own life, and you are also just touching a lot of lives by everybody who's listening to this. So I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And be loving, be kind. Go out there, guys. Apply it, okay?
Great advice. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.